Hello, all you wonderful presentation genius type people. And this is a quick live about getting your story matrix the wrong way around. What is a story matrix? It is some jargon I have just made up. So don't worry if you haven't heard of it before, and it's part of my Reluctant Storyteller series. And it came to mind because I saw somebody who working as a presenter, and they were pretty clearly a fairly reluctant storyteller, but they'd heard all these presentation skills trainers who should know better, frankly, going, tell stories, tell stories, tell stories, tell stories, tell stories. Why should I tell a story? It doesn't matter, just tell stories, tell stories. And they got on board, and they thought these people are experts, so they started to tell stories, forgetting that what you should have done actually is not tell stories, but use stories. So here's what went horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. At the start of their presentation, any given presentation has a duration, right? It goes from the beginning to the end. No matter what else happens, it does that. But the way these reluctant storytellers who overcompensate with the tell story thing is that they start with a story. In this case, it was a case study. And they go, oh, right, it's a case study. I better give my audience some useful tools. So they give them a useful tool or two. Specifically, I think they gave them 2 useful tools on occasion I'm thinking of. And then for story 2, they gave them another useful tool. So that's case study 1, useful tools. Case study 2, useful tools. Case study 3, useful tools. You know, there's no doubt that these tools are pretty useful. Case study 4, actually they got so carried away that they forgot to give anybody the useful tools. They just told the story and left it to the audience to figure out what was going on. And then with case study 5, they remembered and started to add more useful tools. So far, so good. And it's quite entertaining from an audience's perspective. And it makes the storyteller, the presenter, look pretty darn spiffy, if you ask me, because they're giving a whole series of, look at me, this is what I did, how cool am I, type things. From the audience's perspective, though, what it sadly also does is just give them a diatribe of stories by the presenter about the presenter. There we go. And it's about as well structured as the 5-year-olds at school saying, here's a presentation about what I did on my holiday. On day 1, we went for a beach trip and I went swimming in the sea. On day 2, I went swimming in the hotel swimming pool. And on day 3, we didn't go out because I had got sunburn. It's just rubbish, right? What I want you to do is turn this matrix around, and before anybody else I know, I remember trying to multiply and rotate matrices when I was at school was a nightmare. But basically, you've got stories coming down, tools coming across. What I want you to do is rotate that, just like I've done in this next slide. So you start a presentation, it's got the same duration, everything's hunky-dory so far. But now, instead of the driving force being the stories, the driving force are the learning points for your audience. So you decide the first thing you need them to know, you tell them it, and then you tell a story in support of it, a story that illustrates it, a story that embeds it. And then point 2, you do the same thing. You have another story that illustrates it or makes some emotional connection with it. And on with point 3, you've got the idea that it kind of looks the same, but the structure is completely different, because now, instead of the stories being the driving force, now the learning points are the driving force. And the stories are very short and used briefly in support of the learning points. That means that from the audience's perspective, the whole thing looks like it's something that they can use, and here's how to emotionally engage with it, rather than, here's something I did, and here's how you can do it as well. It's a completely different kettle of fish. Add some stories in all the way around. So there's some advice about getting your story matrix the right way around for your reluctant storyteller. The hashtag there, use stories. I'm not saying you shouldn't tell stories. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you should use stories, not just mindlessly tell stories. Okay, that's it. I'm out. I'm done. See ya.